Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. Okay, I want to talk about the Bears game. First of all, the fact that they won a game and passed for 64 yards. So it was interesting. Belichick said something last week. I took the Titans to win that game. And basically, I was on the right side, I felt, for almost the entire game.
Same.
But Belichick said something this week, and I took it to heart. Belichick said I wasn't impressed. He was like 10 for 20. And I went back and I text somebody I know who's in the NFL who's been critical of him. And the big question with Caleb is high school and college. He can really get in the weeds with his accuracy. He can really get into the high grass. And if you recall, Mahomes could do that a little bit in his first 3 years, and then Andy would pull him back in. Mahomes would get really off mechanically. Stafford's done that in his career, where it's so easy for Mahomes and Stafford. They start side-arming 2 out of 3 throws. The mechanics get sloppy. And I thought with Caleb, he's got a defensive coach. So Mahomes has Andy. Stafford at one point had an offensive coordinator he really connected with. Now he has McVay. But I think with Caleb is when he gets sloppy mechanically, who brings him back on the fairway? Because I thought today he struggled at times to see things. I thought his decision-making late in the game and not making mistakes and taking what was given for him was fine. But all these guys struggled today. Bo Nix was as good as anybody, and he threw 2 picks. Yeah. What did you make of Caleb overall today?
Well, I think if you go back to Bill's comments, he's like, listen, I'm not being a hater, but I don't put anything into preseason. And when you're inaccurate in the preseason, do you know what hit me today watching about 10 games in the morning on different TVs and screens? You know how the NBA, once the playoffs start, you're like, what we just witnessed for the last 6 months doesn't even look like the same sport. That's kind of the preseason. I mean, the first 10 minutes of like 10 a.m. to like 10:30, you're watching the Steeler game, the Houston Indy game. Guys are flying around. I'm like, this doesn't even resemble what we just witnessed.
Right.
So the defensive game plans, all these defensive coordinators, even the average ones, are making $1.5 to $2 million. They're paid a lot of money to do this. The physicality of the game ramps up. The question on Caleb, he is going to be able to make spectacular throws, though he wasn't doing that today. I think he was really rattled and his confidence was all shot. But can he just make basic throws from in the pocket? Whether it's a fastball or whether it's a layered throw, and it kind of unraveled on him fast. Now, Jeffrey Simmons is probably one of the better players that the casual fan doesn't know that much about because he plays for the Titans. You put him on the Cowboys or the Eagles or something, he'd be a star. And they were hitting his ass hard, and he was thrown off. And Will Levis bailed their team out because if Will Levis doesn't self-implode, the Titans not only easily should have covered, they should win the game. I mean, he looked like Daniel Jones there, but Caleb, he was atrocious today. I mean, he really was, which is fair because this is what Bill's an old school guy. Sean Payton's, all these guys that come from the 80s, the 90s, the Bill Parcells, they hate hype. You and I like some hype. I enjoy it. Those guys do not like it because it doesn't mean anything once you kick off week 1. And that, like, all that hype was meaningless today if on 3rd and 7 he's skipping a ball. And he was, and it unraveled fast. The arm strength, all the talent doesn't mean shit. And like you said, it gets back to Jaden Daniels. Like, beside his running didn't look great. Bo Nix, who has an offensive play caller, now he was on the road, granted, looked overwhelmed a lot of the time.
Yep.
It's hard. This is really, this is why I've said pump the brakes, especially on Caleb and the Bears. I know, like, Nick Wright picked him to win the Super Bowl. A lot of people are high. He threw that out there. I don't know if he actually picked, but my point is, he could make serious strides as the year goes on, and they could win 7 games. This is really, look at Sam Darnold. He's been in the league for like 7 years. It's taken him forever to figure it out.
Yeah,
this is not easy.
No, I said this. I did a piece for Fox Sunday, and I said, be careful on Caleb Williams. This is one of the best divisions. This is a franchise that ran Trubisky out of town, and he made the playoffs twice with Aaron Rodgers and Stafford in their prime. This media is rough. The weather gets rough by Thanksgiving. If they win 8 games and he gets better, take it. If you could take that today and say he's significantly better, we win 8 games, we finish 3rd, take it.
Yeah.
because what success looks like to Dak is not what success looks like. Years ago, you and I grew up, the hardest thing to do was hit a baseball. Now, that's still really hard.
Yeah.
It's still really hard. But quarterback now has entered that space because it's not a run-centric league. It's a 60-40, 62-38 passing league. And I mean, it's even Geno Smith, a veteran today. His best play was a run. Like, this stuff is hard. And I think we just have to understand. I thought all the quarterbacks looked overwhelmed. I thought Bo Nix had a little rhythm at one point in the game where I felt like Bo seeing the game. He wasn't doing much, but he was seeing the game. He was seeing the field, and he was facing a new defensive head coach. So all 24 points today were scored by defense and special teams. Will Levis, to me, is done. He's baked. I don't think his college game looks like his pro game. Doesn't see the field. Terrible judgment. I think Caleb's going to be fine. But to your point, he looked overwhelmed. And I think the other thing is, if you opened up on the road, it's different. Dude, he opened up in Chicago. The weather was perfect. I had a buddy at the game. Like, there was a lot of freaking heat on Caleb today. Like, a lot of pressure on Caleb.
Well, that's where if you take Bo Nix and you take Caleb, Bo Nix is in Seattle where the place is really loud and he can barely hear himself think. Caleb gets a pretty BP fastball, a 12 o'clock kickoff in Chicago. I'm a huge believer in two things. For young people, whether you're a professional athlete or just a normal person in society, confidence can be lost really quickly and it can be hard to gain. I would say, in your early 20s. And when everyone's looking at you and you start losing confidence, it can spiral. And the only thing you ever have to go back on is your experience. But as a young player, you don't have any experience. Like Geno today, you're watching early on, you're like, God, Seattle looks weird. He's been through it. Dak today. All these guys have so much experience that they don't freak out over one drive. They don't freak out over a bad quarter. And you just watch Caleb, you just felt it snowballing. And what does he have to go back on?
That's
Nothing.
Right.
And it's not like he can look over there and Bill Walsh is on the sideline and be like, listen, I've been doing this for 30 years, won a couple Super Bowls. I'm going to call 3 plays, get you a couple layups. And they were very scattered.
Yes.
They felt very, I mean, there was one point in time in that game before Will Levis just pooped down his own leg where you're like, are they going to lose 28-10? And just be the number one story of the day tomorrow morning that the Bears and Caleb specifically are not nearly as good as we think? Because I really think that you can defensive turnovers, like if they're playing if they're playing just Baker Mayfield or Geno.
Well, they got blown out.
They get killed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they get killed. And I'm not jumping on Caleb here, which I would imagine is going to happen a lot this week. I just think this is so much more difficult at the NFL level than college, even if you're playing at a high level of college. And Caleb was playing a lot of good teams in college. But the level of athlete, the level of speed, he just did the rhythm. I mean, it was glaring.
And the level of coaching. There's no grad assistants on these staffs, man. You're talking about the very best. I mean, Jesus, you look at USC this year with the same defensive players, upgraded coach. I mean, there are bad college coaches. I mean, guys like Mike Zimmer are excellent, and he's been fired. Mike Zimmer is a great coach. So in the NFL, it's very rare when you get a Brandon Staley. You're like, okay, that guy's over his skis completely. Freddie Kitchens. Yep, that's not going to work. Overwhelmingly, almost everybody in this league is excellent.
Well, one of my favorite bets today was Tampa over Washington. Just one, I don't think Washington's any good. Tampa's made the playoffs for 4 years. They are loaded with NFL players all over the place. And Baker, and I was close to where you stood on him. The change he's had as just the way he carries himself, obviously the way he plays. Washington they just don't have the talent. And right. I think you saw all these 3 rookie quarterbacks. The difference of Jaden and the other 2, he can really take off. I mean, he can really run, and that kind of neutralized and kept the game somewhat close for a while. But these coaches are going to put you're just going to end up in 3rd and long. And this is not college. Like, you're going to have to sit in there, and there's going to be, you don't have 7 seconds. Like, there's going to be plays where you got to get rid of it in 2.5. That's why watching Deshaun Watson, who's been a pro now for a while, it's like he has no clock. It's like you either got to throw the ball away. I bet Tom Brady's in there thinking, like, what the hell am I watching? Get rid of the ball. I understand those young quarterbacks not knowing the time. To me, that's more than fair. I think it also shows how difficult it is for young quarterbacks. And I know a lot of listen, I was high on Denver. It's going to be a roller coaster ride for all three guys, which is more than fair in the history of the league.
It's time for this week's player I thought might give almost anything to redo his game, brought to you by Uber Eats. This week, Will Levis, Titans quarterback. Oh, brutal. Titans blew a 17-0 lead over Chicago. That was this week's Uber Eats Player of the Week. Get almost anything for game time delivered with Uber Eats, the official on-demand delivery partner of the NFL. Order right now.